She walked right past his hand, didn't look at it, didn't acknowledge it, just kept moving. The room was full. Crystal glasses clinked. Champagne flowed. 300 of the most powerful executives in the country stood shoulder to shoulder at the Manhattan Grand Gala, the kind of event where careers get made and reputations get sealed. Marcus de Leon stood at the edge of the room, tall, composed, dressed sharper than most men in that ballroom, and for the third time in one evening, a woman extended her hand to the white man standing next to him, completely bypassing Marcus like he was part of the wallpaper. That woman was Victoria Hale, CEO of Hale Innovations, named one of Forbes's top 50 most powerful women in business 2 years running. She moved through that room like royalty, smiling at the right people, air-kissing the right cheeks, squeezing the right palms. Just not his. Marcus didn't flinch, didn't raise his voice, didn't say a word. Because Marcus de Leon knew something Victoria Hale did not. And in about 20 minutes, the entire room was going to know it too. Marcus de Leon didn't grow up with a silver spoon. He grew up in the Bronx, in a walk-up apartment where the heat didn't might always work, and the future felt like it belonged to somebody else. His mother cleaned offices. His father drove a delivery truck. Neither of them had finished college. But Marcus was different. Not because life was easy, because he refused to let it be hard forever. He studied at night, after long shifts at a grocery store, earned a scholarship, then a second one, graduated top of his class from Columbia Business School, and spent the next 15 years building something the business world doesn't hand to people who look like him: respect. By 41, Marcus was the newly appointed global chairman of Meridian Group, one of the largest investment holding companies in the world. Meridian Group, which, as of 8 months ago, had quietly acquired a controlling stake in Hale Innovations, which made him technically, financially, legally, Victoria Hale's boss. But nobody at the gala knew that yet. The acquisition hadn't been publicly announced. It was a deliberate choice. Marcus wanted to attend this industry event first, to see the room for himself, to read the air, to understand the culture inside the company he now owned, before making his presence known. What he saw in that room told him everything he needed to know in the first hour. You see, Marcus had been at this gala before. Twice, actually. In earlier years, before his ascent. He knew what it felt like to be invisible in a room full of important people. He knew the subtle architecture of dismissal, the handshake that skips you, the eye contact that never quite lands, the conversation that starts mid-sentence with the person standing behind you. He'd experienced it as a young associate. He'd experienced it as a VP. He expected it to be different now, and for a while, it was. He'd had warm introductions with 3 CEOs that evening, meaningful conversations, genuine connection. Then Victoria Hale arrived. She swept in at 9:15, surrounded by 2 assistants and a publicist. Her entrance, and it was an entrance, parted the room like a current. People turned. People leaned in. She was magnetic. There's no other word for it. Marcus extended his hand as she reached his section of the room. She smiled. But at Daniel Forsyth, the investment banker standing directly to Marcus's right, she took Daniel's hand warmly, held it, laughed at something he said. Then she moved on. What Marcus didn't know, not yet, was that Victoria had done the same thing twice more that night, and a mutual acquaintance had watched all 3 times. And then, everything changed. It happened at the dinner portion of the evening. Round tables draped in white linen, centerpieces that probably cost more than most people's rent, and a seating arrangement that, by no accident, placed Victoria Hale and Marcus de Leon at the same table of 12. The table conversation started easily enough. Acquisitions talk, market speculation, some good-natured sparring about tech disruption in financial services. Marcus engaged naturally, warmly, confidently. He had a way of holding a room without demanding it. But Victoria sat 2 seats down and, for the first 20 minutes, directed every comment, every question, every observation, to the men on her left and right. Not to Marcus. Not once. At one point, Marcus made a comment about emerging markets in Southeast Asia that was, frankly, brilliant. One of the other guests, a gray-haired economist named Gerald Park, turned immediately and said, "That is exactly right. That is exactly where the opportunity is." Victoria nodded. At Gerald, Marcus took a quiet sip of water and said nothing more for a moment. Across the table, a woman named Sandra Obi, Chief Strategy Officer at a London-based consulting firm, watched it all unfold with the particular awareness of someone who had spent her entire career navigating the same invisible walls. She caught Marcus's eye, save the tiniest, almost imperceptible nod. He gave one back. They both understood, but here's where it escalated, because Marcus, despite everything, tried again. During a lull in conversation, as the main course arrived, Marcus turned to Victoria directly and said, in a calm and measured tone, "Victoria, I read your piece in HBR last month on adaptive leadership. I thought your take on decentralized decision-making was genuinely forward-thinking." Victoria looked up from her plate. For 1 second, just one, something flickered across her face. A recalibration. She opened her mouth to respond. And then Daniel Forsyth, the investment banker from earlier, leaned across the table and cut in. "Victoria, I was actually going to bring that up. Your HBR piece. Absolutely loved it." And just like that, Victoria's attention snapped back to Daniel. Full smile. Full engagement. "Daniel, thank you. Tell me what resonated with you most." The conversation moved on without Marcus. He set his fork down. Sandra, across the table, exhaled slowly through her nose. But here is the thing you need to understand. What was coming next? Nobody at that table could have predicted it. Not Victoria, not Daniel, not even Sandra, who thought she understood exactly how this story was going to end. Because at 9:57 p.m., the event host, a veteran industry journalist named Thomas Crew, stepped to the podium at the front of the room for what was billed as a brief special announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen," Thomas said, adjusting his microphone, "before we move into the evening's closing remarks, we've been asked to make a brief corporate announcement of some significance, a development that affects several people in this very room tonight. As of Q3 of this year," Thomas continued, unfolding a card, "Meridian Group completed a full acquisition of Hale Innovations, bringing it under the Meridian umbrella as a wholly owned subsidiary. Meridian Group is led by its newly appointed global chairman, a man who, I'm told, is actually with us tonight." Thomas looked up from the card, scanned the room. "Marcus de Leon, would you stand up, sir?" 300 people turned, and Marcus de Leon, calmly, without hurry, without performance, rose from his chair. The applause started at the edges of the room and crashed toward the center like a wave. Victoria Hale's face did something complicated in that moment. It moved through at least 4 different emotions in under 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, recalculation, and then, the one that hit the hardest. She looked at the empty chair 2 seats to her left, and then back at the man standing to her right, and her jaw went very slightly slack, because she understood now. She understood completely. She had spent an entire evening dismissing the man who now owned her company. Marcus acknowledged the room with a single nod. Dignified. No gloating. No performance. Just presence. Thomas added, "Marcus's track record speaks for itself. 40 billion under management across 3 continents, and a reputation for transforming every organization he's ever touched. We're lucky to have him in this room tonight." More applause. Real applause. The kind people give when they mean it. And then Marcus sat back down. He didn't look at Victoria. He didn't need to. After Thomas stepped away from the podium, the room took several moments to settle. People shifted in their chairs. Side conversations erupted at every table, the kind of quick, hushed recalibrations that happen when a room full of smart people suddenly realizes they may have misread the night. At table 7, nobody spoke for a long moment. Victoria Hale sat very still. Her champagne glass was full. She didn't touch it. Then she did something that, and this is the part that matters, the part you won't see coming, took more courage than any power move she'd ever made in a boardroom. She turned to Marcus. "Mr. De Leon," she said quietly, not loudly, not performatively, quietly. "I owe you an apology." The table went very still. Marcus looked at her, really looked at her, and he didn't rush to fill the silence. He let her words land. "I've been dismissive tonight," Victoria continued, "and I have no excuse that would hold up to the standard I claim to set for myself. I'm sorry." Marcus nodded, slowly, and with what Sandra Obi would later describe, in a story she told at least a dozen times over the following years, as the most dignified response I have ever witnessed in 30 years of professional life. "I appreciate that," Marcus said. "I do, and I hope you know, how I'm treated in a room has never determined what I'm capable of doing in one." That line, that one line. Sandra pressed her hand to her sternum like something had just landed there. Gerald Park set his fork down. Even Daniel Forsyth, who had been responsible for at least one of the interruptions that evening, had the decency to look quietly ashamed. Victoria nodded. Her eyes were bright. The kind of bright that happens right before someone decides whether or not they're going to cry in public, and chooses, barely, not to. "I'd like to start fresh," she said, "if you'll allow it." Marcus extended his hand across the table. This time, she took it immediately. The room didn't know exactly what had just passed between them, but something had shifted. You could feel it the way you feel a change in air pressure before a storm breaks. Something had been said and received and answered, and it mattered. What happened after that evening is a longer story. Victoria Hale became one of the most vocal advocates for inclusive leadership practices in their industry. She launched a mentorship program for Black executives within Hale Innovations. Real funding, real access, real accountability. She credited a single conversation at a gala dinner as the moment she stopped talking about equity and started doing something about it. And Marcus de Leon, he never made a public statement about what happened that night. When asked in a later interview whether he'd ever experienced bias in his career, he smiled and said, "I've experienced plenty of things. What matters is what you do with them." That is the human truth at the center of this story. It isn't really about a CEO who got caught. It's about a man who refused to let one evening, or 100 evenings just like it, define what he knew himself to be. After everything Marcus endured that night, the brushed-off handshakes, the interrupted comments, the invisible wall that no degree or achievement had ever fully dismantled, he still chose grace, still chose dignity, still chose to extend his hand one more time. That says something about the kind of person he is, and it raises a question I want you to think about honestly. Have you ever been in a room where someone looked right through you? Or have you ever been the person who didn't see someone who was right there? Drop your answer in the comments. This one is going to start a real conversation. I can feel it. If stories like this one matter to you, stories that are real, that hit differently, that make you think about the world and the people in it, then subscribe to this channel. We find these moments, the ones that happen in ballrooms and break rooms and boardrooms and bus stops, the ones that remind you that dignity is not something anyone can take from you. Hit that subscribe button, because there are more stories coming that you absolutely cannot miss. And speaking of stories you won't believe, next time we're bringing you the story of a janitor at a hospital who had been cleaning the same ward for 20 years. Nobody knew his name until the day one of his patients turned out to be the hospital's new chief of medicine, and recognized him instantly from a lifetime ago. Stay with us, because the most important stories are the ones hiding in plain sight.